Welcome to Revenge with Nora. You bring chaos everywhere you go. I can't have that energy around my kids. That's what my brother said to me. Word for word. No softening, no apology attached. Just that delivered like a verdict 3 days after I wired $22,000 of my savings into a down payment on his family's house. My name is Maya. I'm 31. I work in commercial lending, which means I spend my days reading contracts, flagging risk, protecting people from deals that look generous on the surface, but will cost them everything underneath. The irony of my life is not lost on me. I'm the kind of person who shows up. Always have been. When my brother's first apartment fell through, I co-signed the lease. When his wife had their second baby and they needed a bigger car, I lent them $4,000 interest-free, no timeline. When his business stalled during a slow season, I covered payroll for his 2 employees for 6 weeks so he wouldn't have to shut down. I never kept a running tab out loud. But I kept one in my head, the way you do when you've been burned enough times to know that memory is the only receipt that matters. Last spring, my brother called me about a house. A 3-bedroom in a suburb about 40 minutes outside the city. Good school district, big yard, a finished basement his kids could grow up in. The sellers wanted to move fast. The window to secure it was closing in 72 hours, and he was $22,000 short on the down payment. He said he'd been saving. He said his credit was solid. He said the mortgage was approved and this was just a bridge temporary until he could refinance in 6 months and pay me back in full. He said he had a plan. I asked if he had anything in writing. He laughed. Maya, it's family. I'm not going to send you a contract. I transferred the money that night. I want to pause there for a second and tell you something. I knew. Somewhere under the part of me that wanted to believe him, I knew. But knowing something and being willing to act on it are 2 very different things when the person asking is your family, when you grew up sharing a bedroom, when you remember him carrying you on his back through the airport, when you were 6 because your feet hurt and you were crying. Love makes you override your own instincts. That's not weakness. That's just what love costs sometimes. The closing happened without me. I wasn't invited. He said it was just paperwork, nothing ceremonial, and I said that was fine. A week later, his wife posted a video of their front door fresh wreath, new welcome mat, the kids spinning in the empty living room with the caption, "God is good. So grateful for this home and the people who believed in us." No mention of me. Not even a vague, grateful heart emoji directed my way. I told myself it was an oversight. People get caught up in the moment. Then came the housewarming party. 40 people, catered. A custom banner that said "Welcome Home" stretched across the dining room. I found out about it from a cousin who texted me a photo thinking I was already there. I wasn't invited. I called my brother that same night. He picked up on the second ring, which told me he'd been expecting it. He said his wife felt I had a controlling energy, that I'd made the down payment feel like a loan instead of a gift, that whenever I was around, there was tension, and they needed their home to feel safe and light, especially for the kids. He said they appreciated what I'd done, truly, but some distance might be healthy. I said, "So you used $22,000 of my money to buy a house, and now I have a controlling energy." He said, "I knew you'd make this about money." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry, not while I was on the phone with him. I just said, "Okay," and hung up. Then I sat on my kitchen floor for about 20 minutes in complete silence. Not because I was devastated, though part of me was, but because I was doing something I'd never done before. I was letting myself feel how long this had actually been happening. The co-signed lease. The car loan. The payroll advances. The years of being the safety net, the fixer, the one who made herself small so he could stand tall. It had been going on for a decade, and I had spent a decade telling myself it would balance out eventually, that family doesn't keep score, that generosity has its own reward. I decided to stop lying to myself. The next morning, I called my bank. I explained that I had made a large personal transfer based on a verbal agreement that the funds would be returned within 6 months. I asked what my options were. They walked me through them. One of those options involved contacting the title company. Here's the thing they don't tell you when you wire money to a family member for a real estate purchase. If your name appears anywhere on the transaction documentation, even just as the funding source, you may have more standing than you think. I work in lending. I understood immediately what that meant. I made 3 more phone calls that day. Then I booked a long weekend at a small inn a few hours north. Mountains, no cell service, a bed with actual linen sheets. I needed to think clearly, and I couldn't do that in my apartment where everything reminded me of the person I'd been before I sat on that kitchen floor. I left on a Thursday morning. By Friday afternoon, my brother had received a formal letter of inquiry from the title company regarding the sourcing documentation on the down payment. It wasn't aggressive. It was just a question, asked officially, in writing. But sometimes a question in writing changes the entire atmosphere of a room. I had 12 missed calls by the time I came back into cell range Saturday evening. The first voicemail was his wife. "Hey, Maya. So we got this letter and we just think there's been some kind of confusion, and if you could just call us back so we can clear this up, that would be great. Thanks." The practiced casualness of someone who is not calm. The second was my brother. His voice had a different quality than it usually did. Tighter. "Maya, I really need you to call me. This is getting out of hand." The third was my mother. "Sweetheart, your brother says there's some kind of legal issue with the house. I'm sure it's a misunderstanding. Can you just reach out to him? He's very stressed." Legal issue. I hadn't filed anything legal. I had asked a question through an institution. But apparently, the weight of an official letter was enough to make $22,000 suddenly feel very real to people who had until recently treated it like a gift with no strings. I did not call back that night. I ordered room service, read a novel I'd been meaning to start for 2 years, and slept 9 hours for the first time in months. When I got home Sunday, I found a handwritten note tucked into my mailbox. My brother's handwriting. "Maya, please. We need to talk. This is bigger than the money. I know I messed up. Call me." I appreciated the honesty of "I know I messed up." It was the most direct thing he'd said to me in years. I took a photo of the note and added it to a folder on my phone I'd started labeling documentation. On Monday, I went to work. I processed 3 loan applications, attended a compliance meeting, and on my lunch break, I called a family law attorney I'd found through a colleague's recommendation. She specialized in informal financial disputes, the kind that happen between people who trusted each other enough not to write anything down. She reviewed what I had, the wire transfer record, the timestamp, his text messages from the week of the closing where he referenced the 6-month repayment timeline in writing, because people forget that texts are writing, and the voicemails. She said, "You have more than most people come in here with." I said, "I know. I work in lending." She smiled. What happened next did not happen because I planned it. It happened because financial reality doesn't pause for family sentiment. 3 weeks after I came back from that weekend away, my brother received a second document, this time from a mediator I'd engaged, requesting a recorded conversation regarding repayment terms. Nothing filed in court. Nothing public. Just a formal request for a conversation with a neutral third party present. His wife called my mother. My mother called my aunt. My aunt called 2 cousins. Within 48 hours, my phone had turned into a relay station for everyone in the family who'd been told some version of the story that did not include the part where I paid for their house. The cousin who'd texted me the party photo called and said, "Wait, you actually put in $22,000? And they didn't invite you?" I said yes. She said, "Maya, why didn't you say anything at the time?" I said, "Because I was still pretending it wasn't happening." She went quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm sorry, that's not okay." Those 4 words landed somewhere I didn't expect. Not because they fixed anything, but because someone in the family had said them, and I hadn't had to argue my way there. The mediation happened on a Thursday morning, 3 weeks later, in a beige conference room with bad overhead lighting and a small fern in the corner that looked like it was barely surviving. My brother came with his wife. I came alone, which I think surprised them. The mediator opened the session by explaining the purpose. Not to assign blame, but to reach a documented understanding. My brother started with his version, which involved a lot of words like misunderstanding and miscommunication and never meant for it to feel transactional. Then she turned to me. I said, I transferred $22,000 based on a verbal agreement with a 6-month repayment window. I have text messages from that period in which my brother confirms the timeline. I don't need an apology. I need a repayment agreement, in writing, with a timeline we both sign. His wife said, we feel like you're attacking our family. I said, I funded your family's home. I'm asking to be paid back what we agreed on. Those two things aren't in conflict. My brother's jaw did something complicated. He looked at the table for a long moment. Then he said, quietly, what if we can't do the full amount right now? I said, then we document a payment plan. Monthly installments, something real. The mediator drafted a summary agreement that afternoon. My brother and his wife signed it. 36 monthly payments, not the 6-month lump sum he'd originally promised, but documented, signed, legally enforceable. I took photos of the signatures before the ink was dry. Walking out of that building, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not triumph, not relief exactly, but clarity. The particular clarity that comes when you finally stop trying to make someone see you and just decide to see yourself. The story could have ended there. But it didn't, because 3 weeks later, I got an email. The subject line was, question about a GoFundMe family housing support. I stared at it for a full minute before I opened it. Inside was a message from a woman named Denise, who said she donated $150 to a fundraiser created by someone claiming to be my mother, raising money for a young family, my brothers who had faced unexpected hardship after a family member suddenly withdrew financial support, leaving them scrambling to keep their home. Denise wanted to know if the campaign was legitimate because a friend had told her the family seemed to be doing fine. I read the message 3 times. Then I went directly to GoFundMe and searched my brother's name, my sister-in-law's name, the address of the house. On the 4th search, it appeared. A campaign. 63 donors. Just over $8,400 raised. Created by an account listed as a family support network, administered through an email address that was a variation of my mother's name. The campaign description said the family had been blindsided when a relative rescinded a financial promise at the last moment, creating a housing crisis and causing severe emotional distress. It included a photo of my niece and nephew in the front yard of the house with the wreath and the welcome mat visible in the background. I sat with that for a long time. It used my family's pain as a prop. My niece and nephew, who had no understanding of any of this, whose faces were posted publicly to solicit donations for a situation that had been manufactured and misdescribed. And underneath all of it, the quiet rewriting of history I hadn't rescinded a promise. I had asked for what I was owed after being told I brought chaos and excluded from the home I helped purchase. I called the attorney. She said, document everything before you report it. Screenshot, timestamp, save the donor comments, save the description, save the linked accounts. I did. Then I submitted a report to GoFundMe's fraud and misuse team, attaching everything. The wire transfer, the mediation agreement, the original texts, the campaign screenshots, a written timeline of events. I also submitted a formal complaint to my state attorney general's Consumer Protection Division because fundraising under a false or misleading narrative is not a gray area. It's fraud. The campaign was taken down within 4 days. Donations frozen pending investigation. My mother called me that same evening. She didn't say hello. She said, I hope you're proud of yourself. I said, I am, actually. She said she'd only been trying to help. That the family was struggling. That I had put them in this position. I said, Mom, I bought them a house. Then I asked to be paid back what we agreed on. If that's the position I put them in, I can live with it. She cried. Not the desperate kind of crying. More the performative kind, the kind designed to make you fold. I know the difference now. I've been studying it for 3 decades. I said, I love you. I'm not going to discuss this further tonight. And I hung up. The Attorney General's office opened a preliminary inquiry 4 weeks later. I don't know where it will lead. These things move slowly, and I'm not holding my breath for any dramatic courtroom moment. What I know is that the record exists. What I did is documented. What they did is documented. The fog that people use to protect themselves when they behave badly, the fog of it was a misunderstanding, and family is complicated, and you're being too sensitive. That fog is gone. And it doesn't come back once the documents are filed. My brother made the first payment under the mediation agreement on the 1st of the month. He sent it through a payment app, no message, no note, just the transfer. I confirmed receipt without comment. My niece texted me a few weeks ago. She's 9 and she has my old phone, supervised. She sent a voice memo. She said, "Aunt Maya, we made brownies today and Mom let me put in extra chocolate chips. I wish you were here." I listened to it 4 times. I'm not ready to walk back into that house. I'm not sure when I will be. What I know is that my relationship with those kids has nothing to do with their parents' choices, and I'm going to protect that carefully, on my own terms. Last week, I signed a lease on a 1-bedroom apartment with a balcony and a view of the water. My name only, on every document, in every place it appears. My first morning there, I made coffee, stood on the balcony in the early light, and felt the specific, hard-won peace of a person who decided to stop absorbing other people's chaos and call it love. I thought about something my aunt said to me when I was in my 20s, back when I first started bailing my brother out of things. She said, "Maya, the problem with always being the one who shows up is that eventually people stop preparing for anything because they know you'll arrive." I didn't understand it then. I do now. I showed up my whole life. I showed up with my savings, my credit, my time, my silence, my willingness to believe the best even when the evidence suggested otherwise. And they were never ready for the day I didn't. That day came. And what crashed down wasn't my relationship with my family. Those had been quietly hollowing out for years. What crashed down was the version of the story where I was the problem. The bad energy, the chaos bringer. That version didn't survive contact with a paper trail. There's a small framed print leaning against the wall in my new living room. I haven't hung it yet. It says, in plain black type on white paper, a sentence I wrote myself and had printed a month ago. "You are not responsible for managing people's disappointment in the consequences of their own choices." Some mornings I read it before I make my coffee. Some mornings I don't need to.